My name is Kelly Morrison. I'm doing a presentation today about Visual Studio Code. I'm going to hopefully show you a few things that will help speed up your day and let you get home a little bit earlier. To give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about today, this is an overview. There's 6 simultaneous tracks, I think maybe 4 or 5, depending on 1 or 2 that dropped out. So if this isn't something you're interested in, feel free to go to one of the other tracks. You won't hurt my feelings at all, unless everybody in the room gets out and walks out at once. But what we're going to talk about, I'm going to tell you a couple standard keyboard shortcuts that you can use in Visual Studio Code. It's probably 8 or 10 of the ones that everybody should know just as a starting base. And then we'll get into some interesting things. We'll talk about snippets. Snippets is a built-in feature that lets you create a little template for code and insert it into a program. And you can do some really cool stuff with that. Next, we'll talk about multi-line editing. This gives you the ability to select a bunch of lines and edit them all at the same time, which turns out to be pretty useful sometimes. Then my favorite part of it, Emmet. Emmet's a built-in feature that lets you put together HTML and CSS very quickly. And it's kind of addictive. A lot of times when I'm going to stand up and get bored, I might actually bring it up and play around with it. But you'll see that in a little bit. We'll talk about presentations. Ever since COVID and everybody working remotely, I watch people fumble around and try to make the screen bigger and get the fonts right. So there's 2 modes you can use, Zen mode and presentation mode, and that tries to help some of that. And then finally, since I hate having to bring up a charting program and draw boxes and connect lines and such, I'm going to show you something called Mermaid. Mermaid's a text-based diagramming tool. And the nice thing about it is if you put together a Mermaid chart, it'll render in GitHub. So if you go look at a file in GitHub, it'll actually render the chart for you. I haven't seen anything else that'll do that. So if this isn't what you're interested in, feel free to bail. You won't hurt my feelings. If you find something good, send me a note and tell me what you found. Otherwise, I'll just look at the recordings after the session. And everybody's still here. That's a good sign. Okay. A little background about myself for any stragglers coming in. My name is Kelly Morrison. I'm a solution architect at Doherty Business Solutions. It's a consulting company based in St. Louis, and we have an office here in Atlanta. I have a bachelor's degree in mathematics from the University of Georgia. Go Dogs. Got to say that. It's required. Also have a doctorate in computer engineering from Auburn University, who isn't really having a great year this year, but that's another topic. I've worked for just about everybody over the years. I've worked for most of the Atlanta companies like CNN, Turner, Home Depot. Do we have any aprons in here today? Used to. Okay. I know Josh back there. We worked together at Home Depot a few years back. I've also worked at Marshall Space Flight Center a long time ago, back when the United States was working on Space Station Freedom. That was the predecessor to the International Space Station. I've also worked at a couple of startups like Performance Matters, Pathfire, Color Bus. And I even wrote a column for a magazine called Digital Output Magazine. But I wrote it under a pen name. They put together the name Armand Tarantino. And basically I was in the printing industry. I wrote a column monthly. It got really popular, and I had to go to trade shows with an Armand Tarantino badge. And it was always weird, signing autographs with somebody else's name. But anyway, this is the kind of stuff I do. Currently I'm working at Edward Jones. Why are we doing this presentation today? Well, ever since the pandemic and people started working remotely, we've had distance. It used to be if you were in the office, you could sit down next to somebody. If you ever did pair programming, does anybody here do pair programming? A few. If you ever do pair programming, when you're sitting side by side with someone, it's pretty easy. If they start fumbling around with something, you can tell them hey, let me drive for a minute. And you just slide over and you do your work, and they figure it out, and it's just back and forth. But if you're working remotely, it's a little different. If you're working here in Atlanta and your teammate is in say St. Louis, it's kind of hard to say, hey, let me drive for a while, because you're connected over the internet for a remote session, and you basically have to talk them through it. So it's really awkward. So what I'd like to do is show some shortcuts and things to make it easier for people to actually take care of the mechanics of it, so you can concentrate more about what you're actually programming. Basically trying to do away with this kind of person. I know a lot of people, there's been a shocking number of people I've worked with in the past where they can bring up an IDE and they can edit code, and that's about it. They don't know any of the other features. And sometimes I think all they know is Control-C, Control-V. They can copy-paste code. And that's pretty much it. And it's just a waste because there's so much built into IDEs today. And people can really take advantage of it. So what I'm going to do is go through some of the best features that I found in Visual Studio Code. And these are all built in. I'm not using anything today that uses extensions or things you have to install. This is stuff already built into the language. And so we're going to go through some of those. The one thing we're not going to talk about today is Copilot. Copilot lets you basically ask an LLM to generate code for you, and it'll paste it directly in. The problem is you could spend an entire hour or more talking about Copilot, because it's a little finicky. You have to figure out how to prompt it. A lot of times you have to prompt it over and over, adjusting things, and it's just a topic for another day. So what I'm going to do is show you better ways to type in your code, and work with it. Okay. The first thing we're going to look at is some of the keyboard shortcuts that are built in. And probably most of you know most of these already. Maybe there's one or two you don't know, but we'll go through these quickly. How will these make you faster? Well, if you're not having to search around for menus or trying to remember things or do right clicks, it's easy to just type a key or two and have something happen. So plus you don't have to take your hands off the keyboard. Usually, if you're typing, you have to move your hand over to a trackpad or God forbid, a mouse, if anybody still uses those these days. And it's back and forth, moving your hand off the keyboard. And it's easier if you can just keep your hands there and keep going. So, first one, and I still find people that don't know this command, and I don't know how to get anything done in Visual Studio Code because this is basically the command. It's bringing up the command palette. On the Macintosh is Command-Shift-P, on Windows is Control-Shift-P. And this basically brings up the tool palette. And this is where almost everything is configured. This is where you configure your settings. This is where you configure other things that are brought in. You name it, it's probably there. Trying to remember a memory aid for it. There's a whole lot of commands, and they're hard to memorize, so I try to associate memory aids with each one. Usually, you'll see a lot of Command-Shift or Control-Shift. I always think of that as cool stuff, or computer science, so CS. Command palette, P for palette, that's an easy one to remember. The next one is finding things in files. This is basically a global search. It's Command-Shift-F or on Windows Control-Shift-F. If you do that, it'll bring up a little search box. You can type in text, and it'll look through all your project files for it. And again, the memory aid for this is an F for find. You're trying to find something in project files. Okay, next one, trying to find a file by name. This is when you remember, you've got a file out there called index.js, and you don't remember where it is. So what you can do is type Command-P or on Windows Control-P. It'll bring up a search box, and you start typing in part of the file name, and it'll show you matches. So that's an easy one. Then Command-Z or on Windows Control-Z. I use this one all day, every day, unless you undo the last action. For example, if you accidentally delete a line, Control-Z and it's back. You accidentally rename something inappropriately, Control-Z, it comes back. The way you can remember this, if there's anybody here that doesn't already know this one, Z is the last letter of the alphabet. So I always think of it as the last resort. If you screwed something up, Z, last resort, Command-Z will bring it back. And then it's twins separated at birth. There's a Command-Shift-Z, which is a redo. So if you just undid something, this will let you redo it. So you can actually toggle back and forth. I do this a lot of times when I'm doing demos. I'll make a change and then toggle back and forth. Control-Z, Control-Shift-Z, back and forth. And I'm going through these really quickly. If anybody would like to see this in the IDE, just let me know. I'll bring it up and show you. But most of these you should already know, so I'm going through them pretty quickly. The next one, this one's really helpful for people who are working remotely. It's zoom in and out. If you hit the Command key and hit minus or plus, it'll make the screen bigger or smaller. So that's really helpful if you've got a low resolution screen or if you're trying to show somebody your screen on a Zoom meeting. Then there's layout management. In Visual Studio Code, you've got a sidebar on the side. It shows all your extensions, the file explorer, debugging tools, all that. But a lot of times you want it out of the way, so you just want to be able to concentrate on the code. If you use Command-B, it'll hide the sidebar or bring it back. And I think of that as B for bye bar or bye-bye bar. If you remember these old geezers from, what was it, the 90s? Yeah, a long time ago. Bye-bye-bye, y'all. Next one, layout management. You can actually bring up a terminal window inside Visual Studio Code. I think it's usually enabled by default. but it takes up a big chunk at the bottom of your screen. You can hide it by using Control and backtick. Yeah, most of the commands that you see use the Command key on Macintosh. This is one of the few that actually uses the Control key. And it's the same on Windows. So Control and backtick, and it'll make the terminal go away. Do it again, it comes back. And the way I remember this one is backtick is for we're going back in time to when people actually used command lines, and we actually used the Control key, back in the dark ages. And we're almost done with these. Command W will close the current window. I don't know why it wasn't Command Q. I think that actually exits the IDE itself. But if you want to close the window in a hurry, just Command W or Control W, and I'll get rid of it. And this one's easy. W is for window. It makes the window go away. There's also splitting a window. This is Command and backslash. On Windows, it's Control and backslash. And what happens is if you're in an editor window, you can do that, and it'll bring up a separate copy. And this one's actually interesting, so let me bring that up in the IDE for you. Here I've got a diagram, and what I'm going to do is hit Command backslash, and you can see I've made a copy of it. The nice thing about it is I can actually scroll these independently. So this is helpful if you have a large file and you got one function that's calling something higher up. What you can do is bring up one that you're editing and then scroll the other one to the thing you're looking at, so you can look at them side by side. And then close, you can always click it away, or like I just showed you, Command W to close the window. So that one's pretty helpful. Finally, there's the Markdown preview. Does anybody here not know what Markdown is? It's pretty prevalent these days. Okay, Markdown is basically a very simple way to enter text so that you can format it. A Markdown preview window shows you what the formatted version of the text looks like. And to bring up the Markdown preview, all you do is Command-Shift-V. And I think of the V as view my document. So that's one way to remember that. So let me show you an example of it. This is actually a Markdown diagram. It ends with MD. And it uses things use one hash mark for the top level, use 2 for second level, 3 for third level, so on. You can type in text, you can bold things, you can do lists very easily, for example. And we'll do a third one. So that's a 3 list. So what you can do is Command-Shift-V, and I'll bring down a preview of it. This is what it looks like. So you can see we entered a list, and you can see it created bullet points for it. The pound that we use for the title, you can see it rendered as a very large one. We used 2 hash marks for the second level, so it's a little bit smaller. So it's pretty useful. And I'll use Command-W to get out of there. So yeah, that's how you can bring up a Markdown preview. So that's the basic commands that you should know. If you learn those pretty quickly, then you can eliminate a lot of fumbling around if you're doing a code review or if you're talking to somebody remotely. Now let's get into some more complicated things. I'd like to talk about snippets. Snippets is really interesting. What a snippet is, it's a little bit of code that you can insert into your programs, and you usually give it a little key, for example, a 3-letter abbreviation. You start typing it, the IDE will suggest it, you hit return, it'll paste it in for you. Here's what they're for. It basically lets you type a couple of characters and have it put code in. It's a lot faster than typing code from scratch, especially if you're doing things like try-catch blocks or say you're setting up a Spring Boot test and it's got all this boilerplate. It's a lot easier to make a little snippet and then paste that in. And it's faster than typing code from scratch, because it'll paste it in for you. It's better than copy-paste because you can customize it. And you can actually make project-specific snippets. You can create some snippets that are good for any project you create. You can create some that are only good for the project you're currently working on. And we'll see how to do that in a moment. There are 2 types of snippets. Like I just said, there are global and project-specific snippets. Global ones are available in every project you do. You start up a new project, you still have the global snippets available. And they're actually kept with your Visual Studio Code installation. I actually had to go digging around on the Mac to figure out where they put those. Project-specific snippets are kept in your project, and they keep them in the .vs code directory. So it creates these JSON files in there that have your snippets. So It depends on if you want to use it for all your projects, go with global. If you want to use it for just one particular project, go with project specific. Okay, I went the wrong way there. To create a global snippets file, here's how you do it. You bring up the command palette, then you search for snippets, configure snippets, and then choose new global snippets file. And the new global snippets file means that you're creating a file that's going to be good for all of your projects. And then it'll ask for a file name, you type in the name of a language. For example, if you want snippets for Python, you type in Python. If you want snippets for Java, type in Java, so on. So let's see how to do that. Okay, I'm going to hit Command-Shift-P, bring up the palette, search for configure snippets. And you can see here I've already got some snippet files created. I've got some for Python, Java, Markdown, all that. But here are the two that are interesting. New global snippets file, if you click on this, it'll ask you for a file name. And you might type in something like Python. Hit return, and it'll create it for you. I've already got one. And this will be Python snippets that are good for all of your projects. On the other hand, let's see, if you do bring up the palette again, go to snippets. You'll see down here a new snippets file for 2024 Connect.Tech. 2024 Connect.Tech is the project I'm in right now. So if I click on this one and give it a name, and what's the language I haven't used in a while? About Scala. And hit return. Then what it'll do is inside your VS Code, let me bring it up over here. You can see here it created Scala code snippets. So create a file in the project. And since it's in .vs Code, you could actually check that into your repo, and then they're available for anybody else on your team to use. And if you open it up, see what it looks like, you'll see it's basically just one big comment. Anyway, we'll see what to do with that in just a moment. Let's get back over here. By the way, this is one thing I hate about the Mac. If you play a presentation, you can't scroll back and forth. You have to keep coming out of it to move to a different window. You'd think Apple would figure that out by now, but they haven't. Okay, we've looked at how to create the global and project-specific snippets files. Here's what a snippet actually looks like. And first of all, we got to figure out how to configure them in our editor. To configure your snippets in your editor, what you do is you bring up the user settings. This is the settings for everything. And there are two that I would recommend. Editor.tab completion, that's off. And then editor.snippet suggestions top. The second one, the snippet suggestions, tells where your snippets go in the IDE. If you start typing something in the IDE, it'll bring up a little menu saying here's things that match. If you use top, it'll put your snippets at the top of the menu. If you use bottom, it'll put your snippets at the bottom. There's also an inline setting, which means yours are mixed in with everything else. So your snippets are like buried in there with all the ones from all the other programs. Here's what a snippet looks like. They're actually pretty short. The first part is a name. It's basically just a little piece of JSON. Where you have my cool snippet, when you start typing in the editor, it'll show like that name. So it'll let you know basically what you're trying to paste. The prefix is what you actually type. The body is a list of text that gets pasted in. And then the description is just like a more extended description of what you're talking about. So to create a snippet, you just figure out a prefix you want to type, like ZZ, MCS. You paste in an array of strings that are the text you want to put in. And then you give it a name that makes sense, like my cool snippet. Okay, and let me show you what that looks like when you bring it up. Here's like an example Java program, and I'll type ZZ. And here you can see MCS. And you can see over here it's my cool snippet, so it gives you some idea of what there is. And if I actually choose that, then it pastes in the text from there. So, pretty cool. Okay, as far as naming snippets, this is interesting. There's a lot of snippets already built into the language, so I always try to use something unique to find mine. One thing I usually use is I use ZZ as the first two letters of the prefix, because I don't think I've ever seen another snippet from anybody else that uses ZZ to begin it. You can also use company abbreviations, like Home Depot's here is in Atlanta. They could actually create like THD header, THD footer, THD navbar. Those could be names for snippets for them that are easy to find. You can also use codes, like you can start like an abbreviation with UT for a unit test, or something I find really useful is DM for demo. You know, how many of y'all have been to a demo where somebody's trying to do a live code example and they start fumbling around, like they try to write a bunch of code and they miss like a quote mark or got a name wrong and they sit here trying to figure it out and we're all sitting here like, oh, come on, get it over with. What you can do is write demo snippets. You know, instead of the code that you have to type in, you can go ahead and like, you know, create a snippet with it and then just like, you know, insert the snippets. So that way it looks like you're live coding, but you don't make mistakes and it's a lot faster. So I'll show you an example of that in a moment. One more thing to warn you about. When you're using like unusual letters, I used to use the first letter of my name, Kelly, a K, so I would use KK. And then one day I was in a meeting and I stuttered and accidentally hit it 3 times. And I was thinking, yeah, that could be a trip to HR, so I don't use that anymore. So be careful what you name your snippets. When you're configuring a snippet, there's a couple things you can do. You can actually use placeholders to let the user enter text. So instead of just pasting something in, you can like, you know, have the user directed to like, you know, paste something here, paste something there. And the order in which they're done is like the number. For example, $1 is the first placeholder, $2 is the last. When you're done, you can actually put a $0 to indicate where the cursor goes when you're done. And you can also use defaults. You know, you can basically like, you know, instead of like just saying $1, you can put a $, put the 1 inside braces, and then put a default value. So let me show you an example or two of that. Let's look at some of the snippets we have. Bring up Command-Shift-P, configure snippets. You can see all the ones we have here. These are the ones for Java. So let's look at a couple of these. This is a snippet, you know, a sample one. Like, you know, it's just got a prefix called SN. So if I start typing, let me make that a little bigger for you. Let me hide that bar. So it's a prefix of SN, which means if I start typing SN in the editor, like it'll show the snippet name. And then if I hit return, it'll insert a line. So that one's pretty straightforward. The next one's similar, except, you know, it uses like, you know, a quoted, you know, a backslash to quote the quote marks. Then here's one that's a little more interesting. Here you can see there's a $1 and a $0, which means when we start this, we'll go to the $1 one and do something, and then we'll go to $0 when we're done. Let's bring up some more. Let's see. Let's look at some of the markdown ones. Yep. Here's one. You can see I've got like 2 places. You'll notice I've got $1 in more than one place. That means when we start using this one, whatever I type for the first one, it'll put everywhere else that has a $1. So if I start typing a name when I'm here, you'll see it like pop up down here as well. Same thing for number 2. You know, if I start typing text here, it'll also like type it there. Then it takes me to 3, and then like, you know, we wind up at 0. So let's see what that looks like. Let me bring up a markdown document. Make it a little smaller. Okay, here's a mermaid diagram. Okay, so we were looking at a mermaid sequence diagram. That's the one we were just looking at. So if I type that, you'll notice like the cursor is blinking in 2 places. Those are the places where I had a $1. So if I start typing something there, like, you know, Bob, you'll notice it put Bob in both places. Then a tab, and it takes me to the second place. And these are the places where I had $2 in the template. You know, and I could like type Sue. And then I can like hit a space and I'm done. So you can see like entered it, and like, you know, when I type Bob, I put it in both places. So it's really useful, you know, because you can like, you know, put together some pretty complex things. Let's see if there's anything else interesting here. Something else we'll get to in a few minutes. There are some predefined variables like the current month, current date, and current year. You can use those to fill it out. This is something I use. I actually keep a daily log in Markdown. It's like every day all I have to do is type ZZIDE. It'll put in this template with the month, day, and the year. And then it'll like, you know, tab me through like, you know, what I did that day, what happened in the morning stand up, and stuff I did outside of work. So that's an interesting thing to do. Okay, getting back to over here. Something interesting you can do is let the user choose from one of several values. Instead of letting the user just type in a value, you can actually give them some choices. So what you do is like, you type in $, and which position it is, like 1. And then you can put an up and down pipe on both ends and put a comma delimited list of terms. So when you get to that part, what it'll do is it'll actually show a drop-down list for those 3 values, and you can pick one. So that one's pretty interesting. So let's scroll back over and look at that one. Okay, so this is the multiple choice. Let's see. Sorry, this thing is blinding me here. It's like, trying to I'm starting to sweat up here. It feels like I'm at a police stand-up. It's really interesting up here. Okay, sorry, that was unmarked. So again, like A, B, well, sorry, that was the wrong one. Hang on a second, let me get some water. If I start to pass out up here, somebody can get me. Why do they do this? Okay. A minute ago, I told you there's some built-in snippet variables. There's a whole bunch of them. There's that QR code over there. If you look at that, it will take you to the Microsoft documentation showing the exhaustive list. This is just the beginning of it. There's a whole bunch of them. But it'll let you insert things like the year, the date, the day of the month. You can create UUIDs, random numbers. All you have to do is put a $sign and then whatever these in your template, and it'll create it for you. So it's pretty useful to have. So everybody got that? Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah.
If you want to output a literal $sign, should you escape it with a backslash?
I think it's $. I hardly ever do that, so I think so. It's been a while since I've done that, but it doesn't take a second to try both. Okay, one thing I found was interesting when sort of doing this, you have a snippets file, and they want you to copy paste a chunk of code, uncomment it, and fill it out. And I'm thinking the whole point of snippets is so you don't have to do copy paste anymore. So I started wondering, why isn't there a snippet for creating snippets? And I never could find an answer. And you think after all these years, Microsoft would have figured hey, this would be useful. But they haven't, so I created one. What you can do is create a snippets, a JSON file. When you go to create a snippets file, just create one called snippets. And then these things apply to snippets. So what you can do here is type ZZ snippet, and it'll actually paste in the body of a snippet for you. So that makes it a whole lot easier to create these. Let me show you an example of that. Let's say I want to create a new one here. I could type ZZ snippet. You can see it's selected. And I'll type in ZZ top, prefix, ZZ top, body, hello there, sharp-dressed man, description, I'm old. So now you've got a snippet called ZZ top. So if I go back, since this is in the markdown, it's markdown. I can go back over here. I can type ZZ top. You can see it down here. Click it, boom, there it is. So that's how easy it is to make a snippet. And again, it's a lot easier if you have a snippet to create snippets. It keeps you having to copy paste. So. Okay, next thing I want to talk about is multi-line editing. This is the kind of feature, the first time you see it, you're thinking whoa, that is cool. The first time I saw it, it was I think it was at Home Depot, and the guy was using the Atom editor, and he started doing multi-line editing. I was thinking, that is darn cool. On the other hand, I want to warn you, it's not that cool. If you go to a party, I wouldn't recommend talking about multi-line editing, because you'll basically get shoved in the corner. So just a little real world caution there. But what multi-line editing does, it lets you edit more than one line of code simultaneously. And this comes in really helpful, like especially when you're doing snippets, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. It makes you faster because it's easier than cut and paste, and it's simpler than search and replace. Like a lot of times you want to change one word, but you don't want to change it everywhere, you just want to change it in a particular location. So multi-line editing is useful for that. Here's how you do it. First thing you do is select text by position. And what you can do is click somewhere on a line and select some text. And then hit Command Option and move the cursor up and down. Once you've selected everything you want to see, you can start editing. And so let me show you what that means. So I'll come back over here. I've got this big file called multi-line. And you can see I've got all this text here. So what I'm going to do is click here by Jack. I'm going to hold down Command Option, and then I'm going to move the cursor up and down. And you can see I get a long line there. Okay, once I do that, I can start backspacing. And I can change it to say me. Pretty cool, huh? Then I can make it back here. But you'll notice it's only changing the jacks in that line. It's not changing one over here. So this is something you can't do with search and replace. So in other words, you'd have to tab through each one. It's change that one, don't change that one, change that one. With multi-line editing, it's a lot easier. You can only change the ones you want. Okay, so that's selecting text by position. Let me bring this up again because Apple doesn't know what they're doing. Next thing you do is select text by the text itself. What you do is you select a word or a phrase and you hold down Command-Shift-L and it'll let you start editing. So again, we'll go back over there and we'll take play and I'll hit Command-Shift-L. So now you see it selected all the word. On the other hand, if I go back over here and hit Jack and do Command-Shift-L, you can see this time it actually selected Jack over here. So if I start editing it now, you can see it actually changed it over here as well. And I'm not insane, by the way. My mama had me tested. So, and I'll change it back real quick. So again, you can see it's really powerful. It lets you edit a whole bunch of lines at once. And again, it gives you options. Because if you did search and replace, you might get this one when you don't need to. It's just safer, in my opinion. You can also select the ends of lines. This one's incredibly useful. What you do is select some text and hold down Option-Shift-I, and it'll select the end of a whole bunch of lines. So let me show you. Let's find something. Okay, notice this chunk of code here, the ends of the lines are everywhere. What I can do is go down and select it all. Okay, remember you don't hold down Option-Shift-I. So I've got the text selected, hold down Option-Shift-I, and now I've got a cursor at the end of every line. So for example, if you wanted to add something there, you could do that. And this comes in handy when you're actually working on snippets. So, and let me show you why. Delete this one real quick. Let's say that I had this on Markdown document and I wanted to make a snippet out of this little piece of code here. Okay, what I can do is I copy it. Okay, and I can go down to my Markdown JSON. And what we want to do is create a new snippet. So I'll use my little snippet creator. Okay, let's see. Let's call it diagram. And this time I'll use ZZ diagram. Body I'll skip for right now, and I'll call it multi-line test. Okay, now if I was to use this right now, go back into a Markdown diagram and type ZZ diagram, it would insert nothing because I don't have anything in the body. But what I can do is backspace over this and paste in that chunk of text. And you can see it doesn't like it, because everything here has to be escaped. And this is where the commands that we learned a moment ago come in handy. What I can do is do a multi-line edit here. Okay, then I'll use Command-O, and let's see, type a quote mark. Sorry, I messed that up. Okay, I'll start here. I hit Command O because I want to like bring this down. So I can do that. And type a quote mark, and I'll insert a quote at the beginning of each. And I didn't place that quite right, so I got that there. Sorry, this is really hard, like typing code in front of the spotlight from hell. So, and now I can't see. Hang on a second. Okay, next thing I want to do is like select all text and add something to the end. So again, like, sorry. I really need it. I should have brought sunglasses. I didn't think I need them indoors, but. Okay. Oh, my thumb keeps hitting the pad. So this is why I like having snippets. Once they're written, you can just like paste them in. You don't have to worry about like coding like this. So again, like come down here, hit Command Option, bring in a cursor, hit a quote mark, and I keep hitting. There's a trackpad here, and like I'm hanging back an angle here. But anyway, you get what I'm going. Like you select all these lines, to get a cursor at the beginning, and then you put like a double quote. And then you do the same thing to select the end of the lines, put like a quote mark and a comma, and then you're good to go. So that's anyway. Since like I'm dying up here, like I'm gonna get rid of this. Okay, next thing I want to show, this is my favorite part of the presentation, something called Emmet. Has anybody here used Emmet before? A few people have. Emmet is really cool. What it lets you do is lets you create HTML or CSS in a hurry. Because like usually you see people typing HTML by hand, they start typing in the tags, they get lost and they keep forgetting like where they are in indentation, like they end up like missing a tag somewhere, and it's just awkward. Emmet lets you sidestep all that. It's a really fast, streamlined way to do it. So like I said, it lets you write HTML and CSS quickly. It originally came from a project called Zen Coding, but like I think it went open source, and then it became like what they call Emmet. And by the way, the picture there is almost Christmas time. This is Emmett Otter and his jug band, Christmas. It comes out every year. What Emmet can do, like it'll create complex HTML for you, just a few keystrokes. You don't have to worry about like doing things. And let me give you an example of what it's going to look like. There's an Emmet command called HTML5, and it'll generate an HTML page template for you. So let's go back over to Visual Studio Code. I've got an example of HTML here. What I started doing is typing HTML, and as I start typing it, you see like a menu pop up. And the second one there is HTML5, and if I hit that, it'll paste in like an HTML5 template for me. This is what Emmet does. It's just a quick little abbreviation that lets you paste in a lot of code. Okay, so that's basically what we're going for here, just like these little abbreviations that let you generate code in a hurry. Next thing you can do is you can type in element names, UL for an ordered list, LI for list item, div. Longer names, for example, block quote, that's a pain to type all the time, so Emmet has a shortcut called BQ. If you type BQ and hit enter, it'll create a block quote for you. So let me go over and show you one or two of those. So we'll go here in the body. I'll type LI. You can see it, put it there, and when I tab over it, it creates a list item. Same thing for block quote. If I type BQ, I get that, hit return, and there's a block quote. So it'll create the beginning and ending tabs. Most of you probably seen this or stumbled across it, but there's more to it than that. The first thing that's interesting about Emmet is there's a greater than sign symbol. You can use this to denote a child element. In other words, you can tell it give me an element and then create a child with this name. So for example, if you type div span like that, it'll create a div with a div inside it and then a span inside that. And this is where Emmet starts getting really powerful. For example, if I come over here and I type div and then greater than sign and another div, you can see over here an Emmet abbreviation is showing me what I'm creating. So you can see I've already got a div with a div nested inside it. And then I can do something like a P, and then I can actually enter some text. And you can enter text by putting up and down curly braces and putting text inside it, like hi there. And then when I hit return, boom, it created all that for me. So I didn't have to enter the closing tags. I didn't have to tab and back tab. I'm just put a couple quick lines and it created it for me. And let me come back up so you can see that again. So again, that's why I create a div inside that, create a page element inside that, and then put some text in it. And it creates that for me. So pretty cool. You can also add attributes, class names and IDs to it, by putting dot in the name of a class or a pound sign and an ID number. So for example, if I go back over here, let's find a space. If I type div, pound, my ID, you can see over here in the image abbreviation, it'll create a div of an ID called my ID. And then you can also give it attributes, let's say my attribute. So now you can see it has an ID called my ID, and it has a class called my attribute. So next thing you can do with this that's really cool is that you can actually use a $sign. A $sign, you can actually create multiple elements and use a $sign to put a number there. Let me show you what I'm talking about there. Let's come back over here and let me delete that. Actually, let's delete some of this. What I can do is say I want a div in times 5, and if I hit return, that'll create 5 divs for me. But what I can also do is div and say give it my ID and a $sign and then times 5. And you'll see that each time I created my ID, it put a number in for the $sign. So it created 5 separate IDs. My ID 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that gets to be pretty useful. And again, just to back up, that's all you had to type. So it's a whole lot easier to type that than that. Next thing, you can also add symbols at the same level. For example, if I use P plus span, it'll create a P element and a span element at the same level. And again, let's demonstrate that. So I create a div, and I want a div inside it, and then maybe a page at the same time, and then maybe another div. So if I hit that, you can see it created 3 at the same level, a div, a paragraph, and a div inside it. Okay, you can also go back up a level. If you get down in it, you can use the uppercase character there. It means to go back up a level. And this can get a little confusing when you're using it, but you can actually use the preview to figure out what you're doing. For example, let's say I create a div, and a div, and a P, and then some text. And then I want to go back up a level. So I hit uppercase. Actually, let's get the text out of there. So you can see I went back up a level. I created a div inside it, and then a P inside that. But then I went back up a level. You can see it I created a second paragraph tag at the same level as the div. Next up, this is a really cool one. There's a lorem key. This has Greek text. And if you just type lorem, it'll type a whole bunch of it. You can also say lorem, colon, and then a number, and it'll generate that many words of text for you. So let me show you what that looks like. If I just type lorem, hit return, it created a whole bunch of Greek text. But I can say, for example, lorem, colon 4, and it'll create 4 words for me. Sorry. I keep hitting the wrong key here. I should stand up more when I'm doing this, because it's really awkward. But anyway, that's how you do that. You just type lorem and then for it. I don't know why it's not generating it right now. This is really weird. You can also add your own image snippets. Let's see how we're doing on time. Yeah. What you can do is create a file called snippets.json. This isn't the same one as the snippets feature, and you can put it in any top-level folder in your project. So you create a snippets.json file, and then you have to bring up your project settings and set the extension path to point to where that file is. So let me show you where that's done. Here's my project, and you can say I create a folder called Emmet. You can be anything you want. You can call it templates, whatever. It just has to be a top-level folder inside your project. And then inside it, you create a snippets.json file. Okay, so that adds Emmet snippets to your project. This is what they look like. We'll go back to that in a moment. But you also have to configure your settings file to look for it. So what you do is you bring up the palette, you open preferences, user settings. And there's something called Emmet.extensions path. And this is one of the cases where Microsoft's documentation is not very good. It just says put the path to your Emmet file in there. It didn't give me any hints about whether it has to be an absolute path, a relative path, if it's a relative path, relative to what. It was not helpful at all. So I actually went into the code and looked it up. And it turns out it can be an absolute path, or you can put it in a top-level folder in your project and it'll look there. So what I usually do is create a folder, I created one called Emmet, and I told it the files are inside there. Once you do that, then Emmet's set up. You can add your own snippets. Okay. And creating snippets is easy. You can have HTML snippets. You can have CSS ones. And inside each one, you have something called snippets. And this is actually easier than the regular snippets feature. You just give it a abbreviation to type, and then the text you want to paste in. So if I type ZZ main, it'll type a header, a footer, and basically that text. So let me bring up the HTML program again. Type HTML5 to create one. And then here, I'll type ZZ main, and you can see it created all that for me. So just use that ZZ main snippet that I had. Just type ZZ main to bring that one up, and it'll paste in all that code for you. So you can see it's really easy to create snippets like this and then make them available for your project. For example, if you've got repeated code like a nav bar or something like that, or a common footer, it's really easy to create a snippet and paste it in. You can do the same thing for CSS files. For example, CB, you'll type color black. You can also have it put together a border with any color you type in, kind of thing. Okay, we're starting to run short on time here, so we just showed you a sample file. If you're curious about how Emmet looks for files like this QR code, it's available in the project slides if you want to go dig around in it. I already showed you the extension path. And finally, this is a cheat sheet for Emmet. There's a whole lot of stuff to it. I only showed you the beginnings of it. It'll let you do things like filtering. For example, you can take the current day of the month, as a text file. You can make it uppercase, lowercase. You can do all kinds of stuff to it. But it's really powerful. Once you get used to it, you can knock out HTML in a hurry. Okay, we're almost done here. Presentation in Zen mode. These are two ways to remove clutter from your IDE. This comes in useful if you're just having a hectic day and you just want all this stuff out of the way, so you can just concentrate on this one file. Or if you're talking to somebody else and they're a little overwhelmed by all the stuff on the screen. So it lets you basically strip things down or make them more presentable. The first one is presentation mode. And what this does is it resets font sizes, colors, and so on, so it's an easier presentation style. All you have to do is hit Control-Shift-P and then toggle back the other way. So for example, if I come back over here, I'll hit Control-Shift-P. And you can see it change the colors. If I had the fonts a different size, it would have made them bigger. For example, let me make it really small. If I hit Control-Shift-P now, you can see it brought all the sizes back. So it's a quick way if you've got your own settings. It's a quick way of bringing it into something standard, so it's easier for people to look at. The next one's something called Zen mode, and for something called Zen mode, it's a little finicky. What it does is it shows only the file you're working in, and first of all, the shortcut's kind of finicky. Usually you had like Control K and something else. With this shortcut, you hit Control K, then let go, and then press Z. And that'll bring up Zen mode. And then you do the same thing to come back out of it. But again, like if you're coming back out of it, you have to be outside the window or it won't work. So I don't know why they call it Zen mode when it's like complicated, but hey. But let me show you what it looks like. So again, like I'll bring this one back to like normal. So remember, for Zen mode, it's Control K, let go, and then press Z. So come over here, I'll hit Control K, and then I'll press Z. Sorry. There it goes. So that's Zen mode. You can see it like it took everything else away. Stripped it down to like basically just the file you're looking at. And then to get out of it, you do the same thing. And again, it's finicky. So there it goes. Okay. And then the last thing I want to do is like show you a couple of mermaid diagrams real quickly, and we'll be done. Mermaid's really useful. One of the things I hate about a project is having to sit there and like create diagrams by hand. Like bring up a charting program, start drawing boxes, you figure colors, like you draw lines, and then you have to copy paste it somewhere. It's a pain in the neck. So it's a lot easier if you can actually put your diagrams in the code and stick them in a GitHub repo. And Mermaid is the solution for that. What it is, it's like a simple like text-based format, and it can actually like show that as a diagram inside GitHub. I'll show you an example of that in a moment. Let me bring this up. So like I said, it's like text-based like diagram generator. It can render on GitHub. All you have to do is put like a document there and it'll show you the diagram unless you go in and look at it in raw mode. Makes you faster because the diagrams are in the code. The diagrams and the code are finally together. You don't have like diagrams here and SharePoint and the code like way over here in GitHub. The diagrams are text, you can version it, you can compare changes, like somebody like changes the diagram. It's a text-based document, so you can like compare the two. And you can render in the browser or on GitHub. Okay. And here's like a link to where you can find out more about it. There's a whole bunch of different diagrams. The ones I find useful are sequence diagrams and class diagrams. But this is all it takes. If you want to create like a mermaid diagram, all you have to do is create a markdown document. And then just put in like a block like looks like this. You have 3 backticks and then mermaid. And this says that we're going to have a mermaid diagram. And the simplest one is a sequence diagram. And I've got 2 participants, me and Connect.Tech. And I'm sending a message from me to Connect.Tech that says hello there. So you can see it's really easy to create, and it'll render a nice diagram like that for you. There's also one called ZenUML. This is a slightly different one. It looks a little different. This one, unfortunately, doesn't render yet on GitHub. Hopefully, they'll add this one soon. The next one is a class diagram. It generates diagrams like this. And again, like you create it by doing 3 backticks and mermaid, type in class diagram. Then you actually type in the classes. And there are 2 parts to it. You can put functions and you can put instance variables. Like this class has like an instance variable called credentials. The minus means that it's hidden. It's like, like only accessible to this one. If I had a plus in front of it, that means it's publicly available. Then I've got like a couple functions here. These are all publicly available, with the plus in it. I've got a class called client. It's got 1 method on it. And then up here, I'm saying client calls API with the message creates a user. So again, you can see like, it's pretty easy to do this. Let me show you how these render. I'll come back over here to code. Let's start one from scratch. I'll call it diagrams LD. Okay. Remember earlier I said it's always painful to watch somebody type. One thing you can do with snippets is actually like you create snippets for text. Like I created a couple called DM1, DM2, and DM3 for demos. If I type DM1, it'll create like a diagram for me. DM2, like inserts like a second one. DM3. So you can see if you're like doing a presentation, you can just like type a letter or 2, it'll paste in the code. You don't have to worry about like wasting people's time or forgetting that, hey, I only had 2 tick marks there. So that shows you what these look like. And you can actually like view these in your browser. Like you can bring it up side by side. Let me hide the bye. And these are live. For example, like you got demo down here. You can like type the diagram, and you can see it updates the diagram in real time. There's also other things you can do, like you can change the name, like so Kelly Morrison, you can see it updates it. You can actually add loops, stuff like that. There's a whole bunch too. If you go to the Mermaid site, you can find out about this. But anyway, we've about hit time, so let's finish this up. Here's a link to the slides. Let me make this bigger so you can see it. This up here is the GitHub repo, the presentations I've done. If you look in it, you'll see a 2024 Connect.Tech. It'll have a PDF of all the slides from today. This is a link to my LinkedIn. You can connect with me there, Doherty. If there's anything you want to follow up on or ask questions about, this is my email address, kellyivormorrison@gmail.com. And because everybody's been a good sport, there's a picture of my pretty dog, Daisy May, who's sitting at home waiting on me. She's probably working on her website right now. It's like ratemybalm.com, but yeah, she's more successful than me. Anyway, thanks for attending. I appreciate it. Slides are there. If you have any questions, just contact me, or I'll be here for a few minutes. Thank you.